Welcome to the Altered Call podcast. How much do you trust your experience or perceptions of the world? How much should you? My name is Pillischafske. I believe that we lie to ourselves too easily. I believe that there are giants in the land, and I believe that you are uniquely created to reflect God's glory in the world. Over time, we are refined by the world, whether we accept it or not. This is why, as time progresses, people change. You are not who you were 20 years ago, but have you adapted consciously or unconsciously? Have you chosen to become who you are, or have you been shaped in the image of your surroundings? Harder yet, what must you do if you desire to be shaped in the image of our God? Today I want to talk about iteration, or the gradual shifting of a belief as we navigate the world. If we are going to practice our beliefs and strengthen them over time, we need to ensure that we give ourselves the opportunity to refine them as we go. Even if a belief that we hold is true, it will often start out as weak and unrefined. Strong beliefs, even beliefs based in truth, take time to develop and grow. They aren't handed down from our pastors, our parents, or the Bible itself. Any of those might plant the seed, but how it grows from there is entirely up to you. Let's start by exploring iteration generally, and then we'll move to implementation. In order to iterate well, we need to gather information. Let's say that we hold the belief that God will provide. We reference Matthew 6:25 through 33 as a source, and a new belief is officially established. It is true, it is biblical. We are ready to go. Now we need to strengthen this belief. In order to do this effectively, we need to generate feedback. We will need to determine what inputs we are willing to consider, as well as define a relevant interval for reevaluation. One problem that our beliefs face is that we define them poorly. A poorly defined belief sits very comfortably upon a shelf because it is flexible enough to avoid any real testing. In this case, God will provide is poorly defined. When will He provide? What will He provide? Under what conditions? Start by defining terms. In this case, let's start with the idea that He will provide for all physical needs at all times. I'm not going to worry about whether this is correct at this point. I just want a place to begin. Now we test. We've decided that in order for our belief to be correct, our physical needs, which we will approximate using our monthly budget, must be met, and that we will evaluate that claim at the end of each month. Month 1. All is well. There's nothing we can really do with a single data point, so we continue. Month 2. All is well. We start to strengthen our belief. Month 3. We fall $200 short of budget. Now what? What does this mean? It's important to realize that this could mean anything. This is why iteration matters. When you run into these types of issues, it's important not to overreact. We can figure out how the belief is wrong later. For now, the important thing is that we have found a weakness. A weakness isn't necessarily a fatal flaw, but it does mean that this belief is not yet fully formed. By acknowledging the weakness that you found, instead of ignoring it or running from it, you give yourself the opportunity to reshape the belief and try again. This weakness could mean many different things. The belief could be entirely wrong. Maybe God doesn't provide. The belief could be misunderstood. Maybe we misinterpreted something from the Bible. The belief could still be poorly defined. We might be mistaking the definition of a need. The belief might not be correct in the particular way that we are applying it. Maybe it's a spiritual provision and not a physical one. Or we might be evaluating the feedback incorrectly. Maybe a month isn't enough time. Possibly a year would provide for more consistent data. This is the beginning of the journey, and taking you much further down this road will only exhaust us all. But in general, you want to take the information, reshape the belief, and try again. Maybe it gets better. Maybe it gets worse. The important thing is that you continue the process over and over again until you find a definition and understanding that you are willing to stand by in the face of doubt. In order to stare down doubt, you will need to test the belief against appropriate but increasingly more challenging tests. This allows you to interact with the rough edges of the belief such that they either vanish or become firm in response. In this case, it's easy to say that God provides when you have a stable income. But what if that goes away? What will you believe then? If you have never strengthened the belief through testing, then at the moment of trial you have two choices. You can either strengthen it all at once, or you can watch as it falls apart. Now, I have seen many instances where God's mercy has come to the rescue of a belief or a believer that was thrown into the deep end. But even if the belief survives and is strengthened in the light of His mercy, this process hurts. If you have the opportunity to avoid this pain, I would recommend that you take it. Still, if you follow the advice that I've laid out so far in this episode, your progress will be slow and inconsistent. So let's move on to a better method. Your beliefs, stemming from your background, your observations, your skills, your convictions, are uniquely your own. They are a gift from God that belongs exclusively to you. No one else will ever view Him the same way that you do, or have the opportunity to thank Him for the complex web of blessings and curses that He has allowed in your life. You were fearfully and wonderfully made, with gifts and opportunities that God can use for His glory. But unto yourself these gifts are difficult to refine. While God has gifted you uniquely as an individual, these gifts cannot reach their full potential outside of godly community. The phrase lived experience has recently risen to prominence and is used most often in an attempt to describe how an individual or narrow collective have chosen to interpret the world around them. I like to describe the worldviews represented in these expressions as not yet proven. They aren't necessarily true, and they aren't necessarily false. It is certainly true that the belief represents the conclusion that the individuals or groups have come to in their exploration or experience of the world. But holding these beliefs too tightly in their unproven state can lead to problems. Proper iteration requires consciously engaging with the belief, and it requires routine testing against reality. Often a phrase like lived experience betrays a lack of one or both of these requirements. In the Ecclesiastes episode, I spoke about the moral problem presented by variance. In short, inconsistent feedback results in a disparity between inputs and outputs such that we cannot be entirely certain how one or more variables affect the outcome generated. As such, instead of judging by the limited output that we receive naturally, we need to proactively test a system in order to generate enough feedback that the pull of variance is reduced over time. As an individual testing a belief against reality in isolation, you expose yourself to disproportionate levels of that inconsistency. It can be hard to iterate at a frequency that allows you to gather enough data, let alone enough relevant data, to come to any meaningful conclusions. As such, we turn to the collective experience of others. Now, this immediately runs us into the problem that we are prone to disproportionately trust our own experiences and thereby discount the experiences or inputs of others. This pull towards autonomy often leads to blind spots or poorly formed beliefs being strengthened to the detriment of the holder. It's a silly example, but several years ago we blew my aunt's mind when we reintroduced her to the concept of compound words. My aunt was a doctor and generally a very intelligent person, but somehow had entirely missed the concept of compound words. So we spent an entire afternoon playing the compound word game. Fire truck. Fire. Truck. Fire truck. Her jaw drops. Rainbow. Rain. Bow. Rainbow. She laughs hysterically. Ice cream. Ice. Cream. Ice cream. She thinks for a moment and then glares at me. It was a very fun afternoon, but it shows just how limited or confused our own perception of the world can become if it goes untested. Again, I am certain that she was taught this at some point, but on that day the concept was entirely gone, and she had to settle for being taught basic grammar by children. I often wonder why God allows for variance in the world. Sometimes it feels unfair to consider all of the various things that we must master in order to simply maintain our existence. And adding the complexities of variance seems like far too much. Even given all of the modern conveniences and access to information that we have, it is difficult to prosper in the world under our own power. Certainly things would be a lot easier if feedback was consistent, if you could trust the validity of your own experience, if cause and effect far more intimately tied to one another. And I think that there are many different reasons that this might be the case. But the one that I want to explore here is community. I think that the world was consciously designed to be too much for the individual, but far easier for a collective. The idea of individual people, or even households existing in solitary bliss, is a relatively new idea, and I'm inclined to believe that it isn't going very well. Outcomes for individuals are improved dramatically the more intimately they are connected with their local community. I believe that this derives from both social benefits and as a result of a more highly refined communal wisdom that emerges over time. While the experience of the individual may fail, the experience of the larger collective will ultimately be more representative of the truth. Without submitting our lived experience to the combined experience and testing of a community, we are incapable of becoming the best versions of ourselves. And I think that this is by design. In the first chapter of Romans, Paul laments that he is unable to visit Rome and leverage his unique giftings towards the betterment of that church. It is tempting to think of this as a one-sided transaction given the importance that we place on the writings of Paul in the modern era. Obviously, he would want to visit as many churches as possible so that he could show them how to do things properly. But that isn't what he says. Instead, he says this in Romans 1:11 through 12. For I am longing to see you so that I may share with you some spiritual gift to strengthen you, or rather, so that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. Paul both wants to bring his gifts to Rome and he wants to receive the support and encouragement of those in the Roman church. While an outside perspective or additional data is enticing, I don't know that that's what Paul is looking for. There's a word in the Bible that I have become obsessed with lately: unity. Not unity with God, but unity with each other. I believe that each believer has one or more aspects of God that they perceive more or less correctly, and when those aspects are combined in unity, it allows for explosive refinement. As each individual brings their best to the exploration of God, I believe that the new entity formed is dramatically closer to perceiving the truth than each individual on their own. This might be an insane rabbit hole, but in Matthew 18:19 through 20, it says that where two or more gather, that God can be found in that space. What if instead of perceiving this as a summoning ritual for God, it is an acknowledgement of the exponential effect of bringing believers into unity and common purpose? What if God's presence is simply the increased capacity generated in the common exploration of His nature when faithfully leveraging the strengths of all involved? What if, when two believers gather in His name, 1 + 1 = 3? By exposing our beliefs to other believers, by leveraging the best aspects of each other, by integrating the relevant experience of the whole, our beliefs are able to be refined and strengthened more quickly. Now we just need to maximize the amount that we are able to learn from that process. This all starts with trust. The higher the level of trust between the individuals, the more progress that can be made. If you have known someone for 20 minutes, it isn't likely that you will reshape your life based on their feedback. But if you have known and trusted someone for 20 years, you might consider it. The higher the degree of trust that you place in the individual that is offering their feedback, or in the community that is representative of that feedback, the more likely you are to overcome your own experience and bias on the matter. If the Bible were a non-religious text, I think that it would still be one of the most miraculous books ever collected. The willingness for the Jewish people to gather and preserve the wisdom of their culture over the course of several thousand years is among the most impressive accomplishments of mankind, with or without God being the central focus. This is why many Jewish people to this day are so proud of their heritage. They have, in fact, achieved a great feat and built out communities of trust and respect in response. Now, many Christian communities are smaller and much newer, but if we can leverage the truths that are found in the Bible along with the various giftings of the Holy Spirit that we have been imbued with, then I think that we can come to similarly strong ends. In our small groups, we leverage a process that I call the web of discipleship. It's not that each person is paired with a particular mentor, but instead we attempt to leverage the best aspect of ourselves in service of the individual that is struggling. So when a new issue is presented, we focus on the underlying belief and then assign as a temporary mentor someone with a unique strength or passion for that belief. Iteration allows for slow and steady progress, but by trusting and leveraging the strength of a fellow Christian, you are able to make massive strides in strengthening a particular belief. This still won't get you to the finish line, but it does allow you to skip over several of the early iterations and process your feedback more effectively, such that each new series is far more effective than a solo exploration has any hope of being. This isn't the same as trusting an expert or looking up advice online. This is handing a small portion of your life over to a trusted friend and allowing them to nurture you. This is the insane benefit of Christian fellowship, and a type of springboard towards strong belief that the world does not have access to. We are called to see the good in each other, to give of ourselves towards the benefit of the body, and we are assured that when two or more of us agree on something, that God Himself will pay attention to the process. If you don't have a community, find one. If you need help, head to my website, because this is what God has called me into, and I will do whatever I can to ignite your growth. We need to strengthen our beliefs together, because on our own, it just won't happen. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Altered Call podcast. Feel free to like and subscribe if you find value exploring these ideas. You can reach me by email using alex@alteredcall.com, or you can visit the website for additional information.